down when we say it is 12.5%. Because we've worked out for each of the different asset classes, each varied with the indexation. I'll ask secretaries to elaborate on it. But the point that we brought it down from below the average to 12.5, which is the lowest if you can look at the last several years, encourages investment in the markets. With that said, I'll ask Somanathan or who is going to elaborate, Sanjay, on the specifics.
So you had, there were, I think, two or more parts to your question. One was on real estate and gold and other assets. So earlier the rate was 20% with indexation. It has now been reduced to 12.5% without indexation. If you assume that the rate of return on real estate is typically above 10% per annum, and if you take inflation at about 4% per annum, the real rate of return was earlier, let's say, somewhere between 6 and 16% per annum in real estate. If it was 16%, 20% of 16% was being taxed. The effective rate was 16%. It has gone down to 12.5%. If the rate of return was 10% per annum nominal, it has also remained approximately the same at 12.5%. So actually there is either a reduction or no change in respect of the effective rate of tax on property and gold. Now, as regards the equity, yes, it has gone up from 10 to 12.5, but you'll also find that unlisted equity has gone down from 20 with indexation to 12.5 without indexation. Basically, we have a very, very simple, easy regime. All listed, all unlisted are at 12.5% long term. And all are at 20%, I mean, equities are at 20% and everything else is at applicable rate for short term. So yes, short term has gone up, and yes, long term has been rationalized. It has not necessarily gone up. And Sanjay, would you like to add anything?
One point I would like to add over here is that we also need to keep in mind as to the kind of people who are actually paying these taxes, the capital gains on the securities, the listed securities especially. And so over there, when we did this analysis for the year 22-23, we found that about 88% of the tax is actually coming from people who have an income of more than 15 lakh. 61% of that income is actually coming from people who have an income of more than 1 crore.
That is income on capital gains on this.
And we are all aware that otherwise, the standard rate is, about 30%. And for some, it can go up to 39%. So this marginal, very small marginal increase is actually impacting only those, primarily those who have an income of more than 15 lakh rupees per year.
Okay, number 3.
On capital gains.
Ma'am, Timsi Jaipuria from CNBC TV 18. You announced a very lucrative new tax regime with changes in tax slabs. A lot of new changes are there in the income tax side, on the revenue side. And in the speech, you mentioned that revenue foregone will be around 29,000 crore rupees, whereas government will now try to mobilize around 30,000 crore rupees. What will be these revenue mobilization measures, and from where do you think this foregone revenue will be recovered? If you can highlight, where are you foregoing the revenue and where are you going to recoup this revenue from?
First of all, it is not just because we've mentioned it in this budget, but the attempt to widen the tax net is something which we've been repeatedly saying, that India's tax net will have to be widened, whether it is in the direct taxation or indirect. Second, there are also now the PSU dividends which are improving because their valuations have gone up really high. And their performance is also now substantially increased. So revenue mobilization is not just tax-based, you have non-tax revenue mobilizations which are also coming up. Then we had, for almost now 3 years, been talking about asset monetization, which is not selling of assets, but optimum utilization of those assets which are lying in the form of unutilized stadiums or land which is available with PSUs which can be utilized for better purposes. That's a third one. Fourth, you're also looking at generating resources from newer areas. So in all those, the revenue is going to be mobilized better, and as a result of which the revenue foregone will be now made up for, is our expectation. We've said that in the budget. In my speech itself, I mentioned it. And I'm sure there are secretaries who will want to add to it. Sanjay?
Ma'am, I'll give the for details. 37,000 crore, 29,000 crore in direct taxes and 8,000 crore in indirect taxes. So 29,000 crore direct taxes primarily comprises of three taxes, which is the increase in the STT only on derivatives, which is only on futures and options. And secondly, the buyback tax, which is to be now done in the hands of the recipient. While on the one hand, it will rationalize the tax and be more equitous and fair, because those who should be paying the taxes, higher taxes, in the higher income groups, they will pay higher tax, and those who are in nil tax category or in lower tax category, they don't have to pay a tax or a lower tax. While it does that, at the same time, it does bring in some revenue also, about 4,000 crore. And remaining, about 15,000 crore should come, from the capital gains taxes. On the indirect taxes, we are losing, as I said, about 8,000 crore primarily on the reduction in duties, especially in gold. There is a huge reduction from 15% to 6%. And then there is revenue foregone because of the personal income tax rates and the standard deduction being allowed in the new tax regime.
280, please. Backside, please. Give the mic.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Surbhi from Business Today. Ma'am, the angel tax has been abolished, which is a very welcome move. But just wanted to understand that one of the things the angel tax was also doing was checking money laundering concerns. So could you explain how these will be taken care of now? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to hear it is welcome. You've been raising this issue, as with many others outside of media also, saying, are you considering it? Although it was introduced during the UPA government, and it was introduced in 2012. 2 years had passed, and since after that, when we came in, we tried keeping as a good governance principle, government being a continuum, the tax continued. Although we tried giving carve-outs for startups and also making it simpler, bringing parity for the non-resident Indians, the way in which they've been treated as opposed to the Indian investments and so on. Today we've announced that we will indeed remove it. Exactly the details, Sanjay, would you want to elaborate on it?
Yes, sure, ma'am. So we should be aware that this is actually a tax measure. It's not really a money laundering issue, but money laundering issue was being tackled through a tax measure. So first of all, I want to clarify that this tax, there are other provisions in the income tax itself, first of all, to find out the source of these funds. Number two, there is already, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which continues to be in existence. So if there is money which is being laundered, money, being paid as a bribe or for use in, other purposes for terrorism, etc., there are enough laws, including the Nyaya Sahita, Bharatiya Nyaya Sahita, and the Prevention of Money Laundering Act to take care of those issues. While on the other hand, now some genuine money for investment, actually, there is this deterrent provision no longer exists, while provisions for money laundering remain, and they should be sufficient to cater to it.
I would add that there are also certain provisions of the Companies Act which can be invoked if there is deliberate undervaluation of shares. So there are other legal remedies. The balance here is between preventing money laundering, but accidentally also preventing investment. So that balance is what we are seeking to get it right.
211, backside. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Prakash Predashi from ET Now. My question is, will the increased STT be applicable from April 1 or prospective? And if from April 1, will there be retrospective tax calculation for the increased amount?
It's not retrospective. It is with effect from 1st of October 2024. So we are giving sufficient time for the exchanges and the people, who collect this tax to put their systems in place to be able to collect it. It's not retrospective, it is prospective.
13. 11. 11. 11.
Ma'am, Karishma here from Business Today. Ma'am, congratulations to you and everybody. Ma'am, my question is on this special assistance to Andhra Pradesh and Bihar. 15,000 crore is the number that you've given for Andhra Pradesh for this financial year. Is there further assistance that you are looking at, or is it going to be need-based in terms of the amount?
I've already mentioned in the budget speech that 15,000 crore is coming through the multilateral development assistance, which we borrow from the multilateral banks, whether it is World Bank or ADB or AIB, whatever.